All right, ready?
Yes.
Thanks so much for being with us here on Atlanta News First Plus. I'm Joy Limnacker. Just want to share with you some of the top stories that we are following, starting with some new information about the disappearance of a woman in Alabama. And this story has really captured headlines around the nation. So we actually have a special guest joining us to discuss it. We're going to go into the details, but first I want to introduce our guest standing by with us. We have law enforcement expert, retired Senior Sergeant Charles Yarbaugh. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
And I know you, for our viewers who are not familiar, you have decades of law enforcement experience. So we look forward to, hearing what you have to say about this case. But I just want to get people up to date a little bit on this case of Carlee Rusell. She's a 25-year-old who went missing in Alabama. Apparently, according to authorities, had called 911 with a story about, a toddler walking on the road and so forth, and being kidnapped, and trying to save this child and so forth. But the Hoover Police Department is now saying it hasn't located any evidence of any toddler walking down the interstate as she described. Investigators say this nursing student actually left her job, went to a nearby restaurant, made a stop by Target where she bought snacks, but police say they weren't able to find the snacks with her belongings. At this time, police still have not had a full interview with Russell, but we are expecting a news conference this afternoon at around 3:30 p.m. So we're going to stream that here on Atlanta News First Plus, and we're also going to bring updates, in our traditional newscasts as we wait to hear from authorities on that. A lot of unanswered questions, clearly, but Mr. Yarbaugh, just what are the questions that are raising red flags to you?
Well, first and foremost, the first thing is that she's safe and back home with her family. That's number one. Number two, that the Hoover Department is going to do a lot of investigations in regards to when she was last seen. Her phone, although it was found in her vehicle, who she may have called, and from that location to where she got back home safely, and trying to find out exactly all of the things that had to go along with the investigation. And that's something that the Hoover Department, along with the detectives, are going to do, and trying to find out as much information as possible of exactly what happened between the time that she was stopped and first allegedly seen this child on the highway to where she wound up back home safely.
Yeah. What are we going to be listening for today when this press conference happens, this update from authorities? What are some of the questions that you're hoping are going to be answered today?
Well, exactly from her, more so than anything else, is that exactly what went on from the time that she left her residence, any phone calls that she made, where her phone calls pinged off or any towers, and then also the evidence that may be in the vehicle. I'm quite sure that they took the vehicle for evidence. There may be some things in the vehicle that could also lead to questions and answers to the investigation. And then most importantly, her mental status, how she was, anything on social media that they may look into as well, and maybe find out more information as well as that.
And what are the consequences for all this? Because people, you can't just, and listen, we're not accusing anyone, or you can't convict someone, right? There's an investigation underway. But
That's
if
correct.
there is a suspicion, right, in the general public, many people do believe that this was a hoax, that, she basically made a false report to 911. We don't know if that's true, right? We have to give her the benefit of the doubt. But if that is true, what would be the consequences?
Well, the consequences of filing a false report and thinking about all the manpower that was used in order to try to find her and her whereabouts, the police officers, the fire department, and so forth as well, and checking on her mental health and status as well. So all of that can come into play. And yes, as far as any reports that can be done, she can be charged for making a false report.
And how serious is it when the people do make false reports? Because, I mean, you're out there as officers. You spent decades in law enforcement. What kind of state does that put a department into, and how does it take away from other calls for assistance that might be life-threatening?
Well, exactly. One of the things that you have to take into consideration is the resources. Now, the officers, instead of handling certain calls for service, this is a priority call as well, checking on her whereabouts and so forth, and having law enforcement, instead of responding to other calls of service, and now searching the area. The detectives are now trying to get as much information as possible to check on her whereabouts, going to the hospitals and things of that nature to see if she had checked in if there were any injuries and things of that nature. So all that comes into play, and that's why, unfortunately, when these situations happen like this, it's a big drain on law enforcement agencies, especially if it's a small department as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, like I said, we're going to be watching for updates on this case coming up at 3:30 p.m. You know, obviously you can catch the latest on Atlanta News First Plus. We plan to stream that press conference, but in addition to that, you know, we're going to have updates on our newscasts, our traditional newscast starting at 3 p.m. And we also send alerts for any breaking news if you sign up for that on our Atlanta News First mobile news app. But I also want to just get to a local story that we've been following as well, and this is really a tragedy. You know, unfortunately, we have seen a lot of violence at gas stations in DeKalb County, and now there's a death investigation underway because of an incident at a gas station this morning in DeKalb County. It's at the BP at 2155 Flat Shoals Road. Police have not confirmed what exactly took place, but Atlanta News First spoke with an employee of the gas station who said that the owner was outside arranging merchandise just before 3 o'clock this morning, and then 3 people pulled up and shot and killed him. The witness says that the individuals went into the store, they stole money from the cash register, and then they left, never said a word. The witness says the owner was a younger man who owned multiple gas stations in the area, was just trying to make an honest living. Of course, DeKalb County Police are investigating. They're currently talking with family members and witnesses and other employees of that gas station. Employees say there are multiple surveillance cameras at the gas station. They're really hoping investigators are going to be able to quickly identify the people who are responsible. And of course, you know, we're working to get more information, of course, on this story from witnesses, law enforcement, all of the above. But Mr. Yarbaugh, what is your thought on this particular incident and, you know, this unfortunate, I guess, trend that we are seeing of some violence at gas stations, especially in DeKalb County?
Yes, well, on first and foremost, condolences to the family. The investigation, as you mentioned, about the cameras and so forth, and trying to get as much information as possible, and hopefully getting a tag number, the type of vehicle, and some type of lookout for the potential suspects. The other thing that's very important as well is that there's a possibility this may be an inside type of job where someone knew him, knew his whereabouts, knew what he was doing and so forth, and apparently it was a target type of situation. And unfortunately, these things happen. So for those that go to gas stations, it's imperative and important about paying attention to their surroundings, be more aware of what's going on, lock their vehicles up, and understand, most importantly, that anything could happen at any time. So your awareness in the surrounding areas is very, very important in relationship to things like this.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that case?
Well, I think the other thing, I think more so, too, is that being aware, as I mentioned, and law enforcement's ability to come and deal with these different types of situations. And unfortunately, we talked about this before with the guns and so forth and the gun violence in the city. Hopefully, with the assistance of the general public as well as law enforcement, we can curtail some of these type of situations.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, I also want to move on to this other story that has been top of mind, and really it left so many people shaken in Henry County. It took a 24-hour-long manhunt to actually capture the man accused of shooting and killing 4 people this past Saturday in a Henry County subdivision. And this person was shot and killed by law enforcement officers after a shootout on Sunday. The Henry County Sheriff saying during a press conference, quote, "The monster is dead." And the citizens of Hampton in the county of Henry, you know, can rest a little bit easier that the suspect is off the streets. Now, the suspect is now being identified as 40-year-old Andre Longmore, accused of opening fire in Dogwood Lakes area at around 10:45 a.m. Saturday. And then on Sunday, Henry County deputy made contact with a vehicle the suspect was driving, requested a backup around 1:30 p.m. And then Clayton County officers responded. They learned that the suspect had ran to a nearby wood line, and that's when officers were led to an apartment building, actually in Jonesboro. And they say that that the suspects tried to run, and that ultimately gunfire had to be exchanged. But what we have learned now is that there are claims that this gentleman, had suffered some PTSD, had been in the service in some capacity, and essentially just suffered PTSD. And this is what led to this horrific shooting, which led to 4 people being killed. What are your thoughts on that, Mr. Yarbaugh? What are there any takeaways from this case? And do you believe that it was the case that this person had PTSD?
Well, first and foremost, again, condolences to the families. And then also law enforcement's investigation will probably reveal that his military standing, his DD-214, which is a military record, they'll be able to find out whether or not he was actually in a combat type of situation, whether he was in Iraq or Afghanistan. And then if he reported any mental illness while he was in the military, and also the accessibility of weapons. Again, someone that has mental illness and the accessibility to weapons, unfortunately, can bring these type of situations into a neighborhood, and it's unfortunate this happened. And then, of course, his ability with his training to engage law enforcement. I do believe that some officers were also injured in this incident as well. So it's going to be a big, long investigation. The military is also going to be involved in it in regards to his background in the military and what type of training that he had, and if, in fact, he had mental illness while in the military, and who was aware of it as well, and his ability to have access to these weapons.
Yeah. Apologize, I've got this screen frozen trying to work the electronics at the same time that we're carrying on this conversation. But, it is concerning. I wonder, in the big picture, how big of a role do you think that mental illness plays in many of these deadly incidents that we are seeing?
Well, mental illness plays a lot into it. One of the reasons why is because a lot of the facilities that were housing or being able to take care of people that had mental illness are basically getting closed down. Some, unfortunately, times that people are not taking their medication or the things that go along with that, and it can have an adverse effect on what's going on. And again, the accessibility to weapons. So people that have mental illness should not have access to weapons, but we know that there's always that possibility of them being able to get their hands on weapons, and then, of course, using that weapons in acts of violence, and unfortunately people get hurt and killed as a result of that.
And any final thoughts for folks, on this incident before we let you go?
Well, one of the things I think that if any family member has anyone that has some mental issues or mental illness, is to make sure that they get in contact with someone that can assist and help them. And if there aren't any weapons in the house or readily available, to secure those weapons, or either turn them over to law enforcement and make law enforcement aware, so potentially they could prevent some of these things from happening.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Charles Yarbaugh, for your insight and analysis, and we're going to keep following the latest on Atlanta News First, Atlanta News First Plus, and AtlantaNewsFirst.com. Thank you, and have a great day.